Grief doesn't have to be a lonely experience. Reid Peterson of Grief Refuge is with us today to talk about grief support, self-care, and finding your normal inside a grief journey. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Fenter, here with Helen Bauer.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
At the Heart of Hospice, we're always looking to connect our listeners with resources and services that can enhance their hospice experience. If your company provides a service for hospice patients or hospice agencies, the Heart of Hospice would love to partner with you to expand your outreach. To discuss customized sponsorship options, send an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You want your clients to have the best hospice experience possible, and the Heart of Hospice can help you make that happen. Now on to today's episode.
We have such an awesome guest today. He's got this energy. I kept using the word aura because I just couldn't figure it out. He's got this really peaceful vibe about him.
Well, and his voice really resonates with this calm, quiet, but still meaningful and powerful in its own way.
Serenity.
There you go.
That's the word. There you go, Reid. Serenity. You're serene.
I like that. So he came to realize that grief is something that's often experienced alone. He tells in our interview of his own grief journey and how he found that it was difficult in between support group sessions for him to deal with his grief, and he needed something on a more daily basis even. And so he created an app, which is perfect because it's something that can be accessed at any time from anywhere. So he had this perfect opportunity to create something like Grief Refuge. And I have to say, we have looked at it and used it, and it is remarkable.
It's beautiful.
It is
it's
beautiful. It's just excellent in the way that it's put together. And so we are so glad to be able to connect with Reid and to talk to him on our podcast about his own experience in grief and how creating the Grief Refuge app really did help him in his own journey, and he's continuing to help people. I mean, this app is not just a static thing. It changes on a daily basis. He adds content to it every single day.
Yeah, he said he's the content creator for it, content manager. So Reid has a master's degree in transpersonal psychology from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, and he is certified in death and grief studies by the Center for Loss and Life Transition, which is where Dr. Alan Wolfelt. Reid lost his biological father to suicide in 2006, and he's going to share some about that, and his stepfather to cancer in 2016. So not only does he have a professional perspective, he's got a personal perspective, which I think makes so much difference. So much difference.
Absolutely. So please enjoy our conversation with Reid Peterson from Grief Refuge. Reid, we are so delighted to have you on the Heart of Hospice podcast. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Helen. I'm delighted to be here. I always look forward to important and deep conversations, and I trust that we're going to have one here today.
That sets a lot of expectation. I feel the pressure of that. I have to have an important conversation today.
Right. Well, we had the privilege of being on your podcast and grateful now to have you with us. And so we're looking forward to our conversations today. So let's get started talking about your field of expertise, which actually centers around an app that you have called Grief Refuge. So when did you first realize that you wanted to do grief work? I mean, there's not a lot of people, I think, who just decide to, wake up one day and say, I want to make this my career. What was the catalyst for starting Grief Refuge?
Great question. It may have started on March 4th, 1977, when I was born. I'm actually not sure if I can pinpoint a date, but here's what I will say. When I was younger, I was a massage therapist of all things. And when I had a private practice, there was something special or sacred that would happen in the treatment rooms. And what a lot of my clients would say to me was like, wow, I've never experienced something like this before. And I would say that I was like a deep tissue massage therapist, but they were often speaking to some of like the energy that came up in the room, and then also how they felt different leaving. They also always heard them say comments that were associated to like feeling lighter. And I didn't quite understand it. But then as years evolved and I told myself I wanted to go to graduate school for psychology, and my whole intention was to teach psychology. It wasn't to counsel. But yet I found this small school in the Bay Area of California, and 90% of the student body was there to be counselors and clinicians. And so although I saw myself as an outlier, I was in all these classes with understanding how to do clinical psychology practice. And so when I graduated, well, I had an experience of losing my dad in graduate school, and that kind of opened up my interest in grief and things like that. At the time, losing my dad, it was a very relief-oriented experience because my dad had a life of what I would call deep suffering. He had post-traumatic stress, he battled alcoholism, and he had a lot of challenges in his life. Now, with that said, my dad and I also had a lot of challenges in our relationship. So after he died, I went through my grieving process, and it did involve a lot of relief. But what followed was a lot of guilt. And so in my household, where my wife is a marriage counselor and relationship coach, and then you have me as like a grief support specialist, there's a lot of processing in our household. And over the years, I realized like, if there's anything I could do, it could be offering more grief support. And I've always tried to walk to the beat of my own drum. I've always tried to do things a little bit more unique than the status quo of our society. And so what I found was that in 2016, after my stepdad died, my grief experience was so night and day different. And I really struggled with it. And so I sought out community support through hospice in Santa Barbara, where I lived. And I sought out grief counseling from a professional. And both experiences were great. I joined a bereavement support group and then did one-to-one therapy. And what I found was it was a new experience for me to feel so lonely in the grief journey that I was on at that time. And I thought to myself, I kind of need more support than just once a week in my bereavement group or once a week speaking to my counselor. And that's where I think the seed was planted for this app that you mentioned, which is called Grief Refuge. And on Grief Refuge, it's really about providing support every single day so that somebody can just have that source of comfort and solace literally at the convenience of what they're holding in their hand.
So the name of the app is Grief Refuge. So how did you come up with the name?
The name actually came up when I told myself that I wanted to be more available to provide support. It's like a little bit ironic because originally I wanted to open a retreat center. I wanted to have a place of sacred comfort, sacred solace, sacred support where adults could go to, and then they could experience almost like everything related to their grief. Now, I know that can sound really overwhelming, but it was really focused on tying in, nature's arms wrapping itself around each grieving person that's there, and just having the right aesthetics and the right elements all involved to help aid in the healing process. And I will, I'm going to go on record saying that this will exist. It will exist in the future. But the pandemic changed things, because at the time I was exploring this, the pandemic came and I said, oh, well, I can't really do this right now, nor do I want to try. And so I leaned on a lot of my digital skills, started a podcast, started a website. And I wish I had a better story or a better ending to this story, in saying that Grief Refuge mostly came up as a name because when I did all my research as far as what website domains were available, it was probably the best one that was.
That's okay. That's practical. That's reasonable.
Yeah. And actually, I like the name Grief Refuge, because that's really what many people who are in grief are looking for, is some refuge, a place of refuge, if you will.
Right.
So I like that. I like the name quite a bit, actually. So you have this app, and it is available 24/7, which really is the nice part about having that available to people so easily and so readily. But when I think about creating an app, I have to say I get a little bit anxious because I don't know too much about it. So did you have the background to create an app like that? So how did you get started with this, and why an app, I guess? Why did you consider an app to be the right way to go?
Well, as I said, when the pandemic came, I was too afraid to try to start any in-person events. And so in one of my trainings for grief support, I studied with the Center for Loss and Life Transition. I had kind of an experience of serendipity. And what had happened was, after I gave a presentation, I had 3 different classmates approach me, and they said, hey, I just have to tell you that the sound of your voice is very soothing. Have you ever considered doing meditations for the Calm app? And I knew what the Calm app was. It's a very successful and very popular meditation app. And I said, I've never really thought about it for grief. Do you think that they have a category on their app for grief support? And we looked, and we didn't find one. And that actually took me to taking some action steps. And I contacted Calm, and they entertained my idea. But I don't resonate with Calm's business model, which is working with celebrities and or authors of books. And so the idea didn't go far. And what had happened, though, was moments after I felt my rejection from Calm, I was on a hike in Santa Barbara with my wife and a very dear friend of ours. And this friend, she's a very successful life coach. And she was listening to me go into my narrative. And then finally she got to a point is, do you think that you could do better? And I'm like, no, I can't do better than Calm. And she's like, no, that's not what I mean. Do you think that you could create your own app so that you can provide the type of grief support that you'd wanted to provide? And I said, oh, I'll have to think about that. And at the time, I didn't really know how to do anything app related. So I looked into some things. And what I found was that there are companies that can provide the programming for the app. And so I said, all right, if I don't have to learn how to code, I can create the content. And so that got me started on this journey.
I think that was where my anxiety came from, is that I would have to learn code to be able to actually create an app. I think it's great that you've been able to do this. So tell us, what's been the response to the app so far?
I think this response has been overwhelmingly appreciative. It's actually really surprised me, because here's the thing. When an app is created and you need to put content on it, you actually don't know who's on the other end using it. You may know their email address, you may know their first name, you may know their type of loss, but you just don't know their unique experience. So I remember that being like my major source of doubt in creating the app. It's like, how am I going to do this? I don't know how anybody's grieving. And I've learned to understand that every grief journey is unique. Everybody grieves in their own unique way. But I did my market research, Jerry, and I learned that people would appreciate a thought for the day. They would appreciate information that they could tie in their own unique experience towards something that's a little bit more thematic. And so that's where I said, this is where I can show up. I can take important information, that's been shared from other authors. I can write my own material. I can share insights. I can share reflections. And that's where I think people have appreciated that, because essentially when they hear the audio messages that are shared on the Grief Refuge app, they say to themselves, oh, I feel that much more validated for my experience.
That's really good. So when someone goes to your app and opens it, what's going to be one of the first things that you would recommend that they look at or that they navigate towards?
The Grief Refuge app does have 7 features on it. And so 5 of those features are free all the time, and 2 do require a subscription. What I do recommend is signing up for the Daily Refuge, because in using that, a new message comes every day. And so when you're in grief, most of the people I connect with who are grieving, they feel a strong sense of loneliness to their experience. And that's really what Daily Refuge is about. It's helping ease that loneliness, and it's helping validate those feelings. And so that would be probably the best feature to explore on the app. And it's just simply listening to the message shared. It's kind of almost like this invitation to create your own little sanctuary for whatever the moment of time it is.
So is Daily Refuge like an email that you send out, or it's actually something that's on the app?
Yeah, it's on the app. It's an audio message that's shared every day. And each day it's a different topic, mostly related to the grief experience. For example, what was published and shared today was just some reflections and some thoughts about shame in the grief experience.
Interesting. So you cover a wide range of topics then on your Daily Refuge. So is the Daily Refuge, it's an audio that you've actually created? It's one that you read?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it's narrated by me.
It's got some beautiful graphics. You said something earlier that resonated with me about your massage clients, that talked about how you somehow created this a sacred space, and they felt lighter when they left. So I've been in the Grief Refuge app, and all your graphics and the photographs that you have that type of feel to them, that type of vibe. I guess I would use aura, if that's the right term for it. But it's amazing. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And I have been getting, for a while, I was getting the daily reminders, the daily thoughts. It's like a pause in the middle of where you are and what you're doing that reminds you to stop for just a minute and recognize that the grief is with you. You're carrying it, but it doesn't have to be that heavy for the day. And so I think maybe that's, you have a gift for that maybe, and that's, it's coming out through the app, just the way your massage clients talked about feeling lighter when they got through with a session with you.
I really appreciate that, Helen. That's really nice of you to say that. We'll share some thoughts on that. I tell you what, the pandemic really kind of flipped everybody's world upside down. And when I said, oh, if I can't bring people to nature during this pandemic, maybe I can bring nature to them. Maybe I can bring, like you said, that aura or that energy, whatever it is, to their experience in using a device. It's been a wild journey for me, because although I understand technology well, I'll be the first to admit I don't strongly advocate for it. I advocate for, anything that's natural. Go to the ocean, go to the mountains, go to the lake near where you live.
Right. And that's always a good self-care tip as well, is just get out in nature. There's something about being, out in the spaces like that where it's wide open and the sun is shining, or you just have that opportunity to smell the flowers and to feel the wind on your skin, and it's really a good self-care tip as well. So you mentioned the pandemic just now. How do you think grief has changed over the last couple of years during the pandemic? Have you seen any changes like that from the people that you have contact with?
I feel like I've seen a lot of change. I think I'm going to start with awareness. I think that the pandemic has opened eyes, opened minds, and I'll even go as far as to say as opening hearts, that grief is a real experience. Grief can't necessarily be avoided. And also, there's a lot of it. That's what comes to my mind first. I'll also say that I feel like more caregivers have come out of the woodwork. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. I think there's neat things that are happening as far as people showing up to show their support or do anything they can to help, whether that's donations for certain organizations, or just for example, the other day, I received a message from somebody in my local community, and she's basically putting it out there to invite anybody to come to a park near where she lives every Tuesday at lunchtime. She's going to facilitate yoga in the park, and she's not going to ask for any fee. And she clearly stated, this is how I want to give back. I know that people are really challenged right now. And I think amazing things or amazing little experiences like that have really shown up more prominently in this time of hardship through our pandemic. I'll also say, I think that there's a little bit more of an edginess in our culture and our society in relationship to the pandemic. I think that what I'm noticing is that in my own profession, and also what I see and hear about in healthcare profession, is that burnout rate is getting high. Professionals are quite overwhelmed with the demands. And then the people who need the help, that's where I see a little bit of edginess, because I think it's a projection of mine, but I'll say that for people that are needing more help and then not feeling or not getting it, they may feel a little bit more misunderstood, and that may make them a little bit more angry and nurture a bit more of that edginess that they may be experiencing. So those three things come to mind off the top of my head.
We wanted to take a moment to remind you that the mission of the Heart of Hospice is to be an advocate for quality end-of-life care. One way we do that is by providing education and consulting for hospice and palliative care professionals. The leadership of the Heart of Hospice has over 20 years of combined hospice experience. We can provide training for your interdisciplinary team through webinars and virtual events on topics such as self-care and grief management for professionals, diversity, competency, and healthy boundaries, or a topic of your choice. If you need a speaker for a leadership or community event, please contact us at host@theheartofhospice.com. Now back to today's episode. You're talking about burnout and the grief that people feel. In hospice, we've experienced this, our families have, because a lot of them haven't been able to be with loved ones when their loved ones have died. And of course, we take on their secondary grief as clinicians, whether you're a psychosocial or a spiritual clinician, or a nursing clinician. And I would say that it sort of seems to be spilling over into all sorts of different areas as far as amplified grief. So they're talking about addiction. Addiction issues have risen exponentially over the last 2 years. So the people who work with that, the drug abuse counselors, the psychotherapists, all of that contributes to their burnout. overall. So we can't just say, oh, it's just the frontline people. It's just the first responders. It's just the hospice folks. It's just the ICU nurses. It's become almost a universal language that we've spoken. We've always had it, right? Nobody gets through life without experiencing some sort of loss. But doesn't it seem like it's been this amplification? It's an inflating of this emotion that we've all had and been able to manage it. But I think in some way, maybe I'm wrong, but this sort of has highlighted the fact that we don't cope with it very well. And so one of the ways that manifests with us in healthcare is burnout, resignations. People just leave the industry. You don't retire. You just quit and go into something else because of the issues associated with providing healthcare. I mean, do you see that as a truthful statement? I mean, that's just from my little corner of perspective.
I think it's well articulated, and I do agree with you with a lot of it. Addiction always gets the best of me because I'll be the first to admit I don't fully understand it. When with my dad and his addiction issues, there wasn't necessarily this full, like I said, complete understanding of what he was experiencing. And so what I can do is when I look inward, I can understand that I may have my judgments towards the experiences of people who have addiction, or I may have my limitations in knowing. And so with that said, in regards to what I would call a little bit of the ripple effect happening through the pandemic and amplified grief and I like that term, by the way, amplified grief. I think that's really astute. I pretty much just want to say, like, I don't know, and I understand where my ignorance plays a part. And so I try to prevent myself from jumping to a conclusion or trying to put on labels to something greater or more generalized than what I really know. I often speak with clients when they're trying to seek validation for the normalization of their grief journey. And they often ask me, like, is this normal? And I say, well, you know the answer already. I'm going to tell you, yes, it's normal, and no, it's not. It's not normal because it's such a unique experience to you. But if you can say to yourself, hey, this is authentic and this is true for me, then yes, it's normal. It's absolutely normal. So it's kind of like this polarity experience or duality. And I think that in our greater society, there's a little bit of stuff going on like that too, with the pandemic, our response to it, how we cope, how we don't cope. It's really complicated, as is grief. So I'll digress there.
But I like that, though. Everybody says, is this normal? It's your normal, because it is unique. Every journey for grief is unique. So I like that, your normal.
Right. Well, everybody gets to say what's normal for them. We don't get to say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not normal. Well, maybe it is for them.
Well, and that's not the same thing as saying that's healthy. That's different.
This is true.
That's different. Healthy versus unhealthy, but normal, yeah. What's normal for your grief may not be the same as what's normal for mine.
Right. So we talked a little bit about, coping. Helen mentioned about how people are coping right now. Working in the grief space like you do on a regular basis can get to be pretty heavy, I would think. So how do you manage this in your own life? I mean, there surely is a time when you kind of pull away or find something else to think about and something else to do for a change of pace. How do you manage that for yourself?
I'm going to answer your question, Jerry, in two ways. I'm going to tell you how I manage, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm learning to manage, because I can't say that I have it figured out. It is really hard. And I spoke to people feeling like weight was lifted off them back in the days of doing massage therapy. Sometimes I hear feedback from clients that I either Zoom with or talk to. I provide a service called grief companioning. because I'm not a counselor and I'm not looking for any type of treatment. It's just more, this is kind of a philosophical difference that I abide by, that as a grief companion, I show up to listen, I show up to validate, and I show up to express compassion and empathy for their experience. But coming back to your question, here's what works for me. I'm lucky to live in an area where I can visit the ocean daily if I wanted to. And I think the ocean has very powerful energy. If you think about it, it's always flowing or always moving. So nothing is ever stagnant at the edge of the ocean. And I feel like that energy can be a metaphor for my inward experience. So if I have emotion that's inside of me that kind of feels stuck, if I'm at the ocean, I don't need to say, or I don't need to do anything, but just the fact of that powerful positive ions moving energy through me is helpful in my healing process and helping me cope. Now, I completely am aware that not everybody lives near the ocean. And so I'm a big advocate for moving. We've talked about nature, just going for a lovely walk or going for a lovely hike. I think that is one of the most effective ways to help cope. I've been doing a lot more walking lately, just getting up into the foothills where I live. But one of the beauties that I absolutely love, and I wish that more places like this existed in the country and in the world, is just, I have found, like, not necessarily the fountain of youth, but I found like the source of tremendous healing through soaking and natural hot springs. I can't believe how therapeutic they are. My wife and I used to live in Boulder, Colorado. And what we would do is, it was probably once every 6 weeks on average, we would go to the Western Slope where there's tons of hot springs, and we would just go soak. We'd spend the whole weekend there, and it was amazing and just so therapeutic. And again, I'm lucky to live in a place in the country where I can get to a natural hot springs within a half hour of my time and just be there. I was there the other night. At the time of this recording, it was only 2 nights ago that my wife and I were there. And I went, there's 6 or 7 pools in this specific area. And I went up to one that has warmer waters, so it's less populated because it's really hot. And I laid down in there, and I mean, I started sweating like immediately. But I started making kind of these moaning sounds more to myself. I vocalized them, but I didn't really go like turn up the volume that much. But what I noticed was I started to feel like some of that in my own chest. And then tears started to come. And then there was like more of like me trying to understand what the heck was going on, because this was a very strange experience. This isn't typical for Reid. And I said, well, what's going on? And I was like, oh, this is some of the carried grief that I haven't let go of yet. And it's not even necessarily mine. It's just anybody's who I have encountered. That was a really powerful experience for me, because that was a lesson in my own journey of saying like, oh, there are still more opportunities to learn how to let go and release some of these energies that I may be carrying.
I think that's pretty, I would say that you're normal, right? But I would think that's pretty normal for a lot of people who work in the grief space and the caregiving space, that you provide the self-care that you know you need, but then you experience a depth of cleansing and lifting that you didn't realize was necessary. I also find it striking that it involves water. So you've got the ocean, you've got the hot springs, and then the tears that flowed. It's I don't know, the word that comes to mind for me is cleansing.
I think most of us have a tendency to hold things inside until a moment like what you experienced, where we just can't hold it in anymore, and it just flows out of us either through tears, hopefully through something like that, through the tears rather than through a negative emotion like anger.
Yeah, anger. Mm-hmm.
Or something of that sort. So that's really good that you're able to kind of pull away from the work that you do in the grief space and find your own a little bit of refuge, if I can use that word, for yourself in another way, in another space.
Yeah, it's your personal grief refuge. That's really smart.
Yeah, thanks. I'll finish that experience though. When I stood up, I had to literally stand there holding onto a rock for probably what felt like 2 minutes because I was so dizzy. And I laugh because looking back on it now, it was like, yeah, I was sweating a lot, tears flowed, and perhaps dehydration set in a little bit. But what I reflect on now is that, like, that's the power of some of that release, the ability of like what it can do to the body. Like how much change can happen in a short duration of time. And how the body needs, a few moments to recover and reintegrate all of that change. It's pretty wild.
It is. It's a shifting. I like that. Shifting of mindset. And I keep coming back to the word aura, and maybe I'm not using it right, but, just centralizing you and getting you back, recentering. Maybe that's the best word.
Great word.
Well, you've told us already about some of your self-care habits that you use to help yourself in those moments so that you're still strong and able to do the work that you do. I'm going to get real personal with you. Do you have a self-care indulgence that's maybe not so good?
The down and dirty, Reid.
Yes.
Let's hear it. The Twinkies at midnight. Yeah.
Well, you're onto something. The confession of the day is about unhealthy eating habits. And my shameful story is that when I'm not centered as I want to be, and I'm feeling like I need to emote, but I lean towards something to suppress it. For me, it's a bag of potato chips.
Yes. You are one of my people.
Any flavor doesn't matter. I'll just, it's dangerous because I'll open it up and I probably won't put it down until it's finished.
Well, that's a requirement, right? That's the rule. They'll tell you, you can't eat just one. But isn't there something about the crunch, Reid? There's something about the crunchiness for me, and I'm like, man, that's satisfying. I probably grind my teeth, but this way I grind it on potato chips. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the salt and the crunch. I
the
feel
salt
like that.
too.
That's what has got me. It's that combination.
Well, see, then it's good if you go to the hot springs and sweat all that out.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it requires hiking to the hot springs too. So I'm trying to work some of that out of my system.
Yeah,
I love
that's
it.
Good. Well, Reid, this has been so insightful and so entertaining as well. I appreciate your openness and your honesty in telling us more about your work and the things that you do. And of course, we want people to download the Grief Refuge app. Tell us more about where they can find that. Is it an app on Apple, or can it also be found on Android?
You got it, Jerry. Yeah. Anybody can find Grief Refuge. They can download the app for free. It's in their phone's app store. All they got to do is search it. So it's on Google Play and it's on the App Store. And it's just Grief Refuge.
And you do have a website too, right, Reid?
Yeah, I have a website. It's griefrefuge.com. There is direct links to download the app from that website. And pretty much all my social media handles are Grief Refuge.
Awesome. So if our listeners want to get in touch with you specifically, how can they get in touch with you in the work that you're doing?
I would say the best way to get in touch with me is to visit griefrefuge.com and then just go to the contact page. It's as simple as that.
Awesome. And it's a beautiful website. I would really encourage our listeners to go in there, and we will include links to your website on the show notes. So anybody listening, you'll be able to go straight into the website and connect with Reid and the work he's doing at Grief Refuge.
Reid, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. And we're excited about what's happening with your work and want to, of course, make sure that our listeners know about what you're doing. And for those of you who are hospice providers, hospice professionals, we would encourage you to get acquainted with the Grief Refuge app as well, and then show it to your families. Help them resource this app for themselves, because it's a great opportunity for them to find the help that they might need for their own grief. So, Reid, thanks so much for being with us today.
Jerry, Helen, thank you. This has been fun.
I have to tell you, I am so impressed with the work that Reid is doing.
I feel serene.
Do you?
Yeah, that way it won't last very long.
But it's true. He has this really nice voice. And he said that somebody in one of his classes came up to him and said, "You have this terrific voice."
Yes. And he should do, what did they suggest? Guided meditations.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
for the Calm app. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would totally be good. I'm sorry that they passed on it, because I think they missed out on something great.
They really did. But this is another one of those situations where being overlooked, thinking it's a failure, actually worked out for good, because he was then able to create this app for himself called Grief Refuge.
Awesome. And let's face it, he's down to earth. He's got his own normal, his normal. And I love it that he is a potato chip eating person. Let's face it, we all have them. We talk about self-care all the time. Oh my God. Everybody's talking about self-care these days.
Well, and for good reason.
Right. We need it. We needed it all along, but I don't know. It's like some universal light bulb came on and like, oh, wow, we really needed this. And here's why. Like we couldn't have figured that out all along beforehand.
Right.
But I love it that he's real. He admits to the potato chip thing, and I can cop to that. I mean, I try to stay on my nutrition plan, and that's part of my self-care, right, is to manage my nutrition. And I will say that my husband accidentally brought home some chips. They said they were gluten-free, and they were, but they were also fried, the traditional stuff. And he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, and you don't have to eat those." But because I am a giver, I said, "You know what? That's okay. I will eat those chips just for you."
Just for you. Yeah.
Yes.
You did such a wonderful thing
to
help your husband eat those chips.
Benevolence. I didn't want him to feel bad about getting the wrong thing.
Oh, I don't think it was, it could have been the wrong thing.
Oh, it was the right thing. Trust me, it was a right thing. I know. See how easily I'm led astray. Reid, we blame this on you. You big potato chip eating person. But I love it. His real, his normal and his real is very relatable.
Right. And the fact that he's also open to say that he had an experience where he just wept, and he had to stop for a moment and say, "Why am I doing this? Where are these tears coming from? What's the impetus for this?"
And it just goes to show you that I think a lot of times we don't even realize where we are with our compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress syndrome, whatever you want to call it, moral fatigue, burnout, all of those things that come with secondary grief and working with people who are grieving. We get to a point where we're forced into self-care, or we're experiencing self-care on one level, knowing that we need it, and then it becomes completely something way more than we thought it would be, something deeper. I remember years ago when I was in the field, we went on a trip, just my husband and I, we went on a weekend getaway, and I cried. It was a 4-hour car drive, and I cried the whole way there.
Oh my goodness.
And I realized it was sort of a letdown effect. It was a release valve. Safety valve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just being able to get rid of all those emotions with someone that you had a safe space with.
Right. It was private and that kind of thing. And maybe that's similar to what Reid experienced with the tears that just flowed when he wasn't expecting it.
Right. And he was by himself when it happened. So
right.
That was good. So whether you're a hospice professional or whether you're a private caregiver, or whoever you may be listening to this podcast today, we would recommend that you go and download the Grief Refuge app, because at some point you're going to need the resources that Reid is providing through that app, because we all go through our own grief at some point. And so we would encourage you to do that. You can find it on the Apple App Store. You can find it on Google Play for the Android phone systems as well.
Right. And if you go to griefrefuge.com, there are big buttons, you can't miss it, that say download the app.
And we would recommend that you visit his website, griefrefuge.com. So our thanks to Reid for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer here with Jerry Fenter. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening.
We want you to connect with us as well, so please feel welcome to send us an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.